All right, welcome back. This is still the Polity reaching you live from Abuja. Right now, we'll be going into a topic of interest to many, which is the expectations and the realities of the Electoral Act and its impact on the 2023 general elections. Prior to the elections, there was a lot of hope and a lot of vigor that it would change the face of the Nigerian electoral system. Whether that has happened or not, today we will be shining a light on it, doing some analysis on what actually turned out or what happened and how it fares with what was expected to happen with the Electoral Act being amended in 2022. I've been joined now by a fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts. His name is Mr. Tochukwu Ifemene. He joins me now to do some justice to this topic. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Amadin.
It's been a while. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, good to have you too. Thank you.
All right. Let's just start from the beginning. The school the school you belong to, the Abuja School of Thoughts, we know also was very close with, or part of those who really advocated for the Electoral Act, part of the civil societies and all that. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of belief that these things would be different this time around. How would you rate the way the elections ended up happening and proceeding as regards the expectations?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amadin, once again. It fell below expectations, like we all know in Nigeria, and the critical thing some of us are now beginning to focus on going forward in Nigeria is the concept of democracy itself. You can see what is happening in African countries around. You can see the uprising, the coup d'etat that is happening, the latest one being Sudan. And Nigeria is not going to be an isolated case because we are trying to work with a concept that is not working, which is the concept of democracy. Yeah. So most of us, we are worried. With the coming in of the Electoral Act, the hopes were high. The use of the technology was high. Okay, the readiness of INEC, the preparedness, the public statement they made, the apathy that we once had as Nigerians changed, and you saw it for the first time. A lot of people went out to register, a lot of people went out to vote, but the institution failed because the policies failed for coming out from the Electoral Act. But what we are more concerned about, and that's what we are beginning to try to redirect Nigerians, is to look and begin to question the concept and the institutionalizing of democracy as a concept in Nigeria. Because we have done over 25 years now with this experiment, and yet we are still at this stage. People could judge it as the worst kind of election. If you listen to some other school of thought, they'll tell you that you can't say it's the worst election, because if you look at the spread of people who were outstaged and new people that came in, so you have a kind of hulo-balu kind of stuff. And with what happened recently in Adamawa State about 2 weeks ago, now that tells you, and that shows as a reflection of what happened in the central. Okay, and you heard the statement, both the rec and everything that said. So we are now beginning to be concerned about how can we get our democracy right? How can we get our institutions so that the people can put their trust and they can't believe. And the institution itself should be so independent that at the end of the day, we don't need to go revert back to the justice systems, That is our thoughts, and that's our position as a school.
All right. You mentioned the number of years you spent so far and the progress made. What would you say are the factors responsible? Some persons might be wondering, is democracy the problem, or is democracy with the kind of perhaps culture or situation in Nigeria? What is the issue? If democracy is working elsewhere smoothly enough, what's the difference? What causes the discrepancy here?
Okay, so there's something we keep on we keep on bringing out, and thank you for this question, which is what we call the elite consensus, meaning that how the elites of the society, whether it's of government, whether of the private sector, whether it's of the civil society, whether it's of the military, but there's a consensus, an agreement from the elite that, you know what, let us come together and get it right for the sake of Nigeria. Okay, and that unless you have an elite consensus in any society, which is what you see everywhere where it looks like there's a form of civilization, people tend to obey the rule of law, people tend to want to talk about their climates, people want to talk about their natural resources, people want to talk about their justice system. Everybody have a kind of consciousness towards making institutions to work. Very, very important. Okay, now if we have our elite consensus and we are now coming together to agree on our institutions working, whether it is the INEC, whether it's the medicals, whether it's the education, every form of institution working. Because when somebody did an analysis, I just laughed. INEC did not fail because it was INEC. Other agencies, other ministries, other MDAs also have this kind of failures. But it's just a reflection. INEC is now a reflection of the true state of Nigeria, of a group of people who have not come together to say, you know what, let's get this thing right once and for all. Because we can get it right once and for all. Because everybody would have supported them. The political parties would have supported them. The INEC staff themselves would have not even had people jeopardizing their process. Then the Nigerians themselves will say, you know what, you are truly independent. Because once there's a doubt on that system, okay, so the chief cause is that there's no elite consensus to give Nigerians what we call the Nigerian interest. Until it is established, we keep on going around. You're not going to see like what we saw in most primaries. We are still not gone over the issue of vote buying. We've still not had people prosecuted for vote buying. We've still not decried what happened in the elections where certain places thugs came. We've still not seen people who have been jailed. We've still not heard on the news, this is the case going on this and this and that. So there's no deterrent. And as far as there's no deterrent, it shows that the institutions responsible for that, so for example, the police, the judiciary, any avenue or form of force to deter such things are not doing what they needed to do. That is a colossal failure of the entire system. So whether from the elite, whether from the law enforcement agencies, whether from the regulators, everything is a failure of institutions. So that is the cumulative effect of what you're asking.
All right, just to break it down, when you say elites, who are you referring to?
So like I said earlier, I choose to put my elite consensus around the whole society. So for example, you have the elite from the military, you have the elite from the political class, especially because what we are suffering now is the fact that the political class has no issue of the interest of Nigeria. We are talking about the elite in the civil society. So basically, when we talk about elite, we just say a group of persons that have gotten much more influence in society and have risen to the zenith of whatever they are doing. So whether it could be even a musician that is an elite that has gone up. For example, you see somebody like a Two-Face. Two-Face is an elite in his game because he's at the zenith of that music career, right? So a whole continuous conversation around the elites. You can't find that kind of conversations after the election. Conversations you had probably before the election that, oh, come and vote, come and this thing, because most Nigerians had a preference to a particular candidate. But after the election, to sustain a conversation and to sustain it even after the inauguration, it looks like everybody is just, nobody is talking, nobody is acting as an opposition, nobody is coming to talk about the issue of the Nigerian interest. So, for example, what happened in the confab, if you remember the national confab that was constituted by President Jonathan, that was a classical case of elites, whether it's the political leaders, whether it's the Pan-African pan-national groups, whether it's former people who have held positions, whether it's religious leaders, combination of political parties, all coming down together. That's why it's called a national confab, to discuss the issues of this is what needed to be done and this is how you need to go. So until we have that kind of conversation, streamlined, and we hold ourselves accountable for it, a form of like getting a corporate national ideology. Yeah.
All right, that's fair enough. You spoke about vote buying, and some persons might say the issue with, or the reason we don't have an elite consensus is the fact that there is a belief that anyone and everyone can be bought.
Yeah.
Recently we've been saying that some persons making comments that no matter what people find out about a political candidate or actor, their support is not going to waver, because there's some sort of personal gain. So the question now is, and then taking into account Nigeria, the situation of Nigeria, to make a little bit of a segue, I'll come back to the main issue. Even in the religious setting, there is a belief that in Nigeria, the money culture is growing, where if you are rich or you have a certain amount of wealth, automatically more respect is accorded to you. And so everyone is striving to be there. And I wonder sometimes, is this because of the fact that we used to be, until recently, the poverty capital of the world was still just number 2, I believe. So is it because of that situation that people strive easily more towards self, will I call it fulfillment in terms of wealth or money? Over the weekend, there was a trend on social media about students as young as 13 in secondary schools all leaving school to focus on, fraud, internet fraud, getting cars, driving the cars to their secondary school, making fun of their teachers and so on, especially in some states in the country. So that being said, how could you fight something like this, taking into consideration that Nigeria is the poverty capital, where if you manage or you happen to get there, it's like you've made it. You are now, in fact, the problems of the country no longer, quote unquote, affect you. You are saved. So how do you fight this?
Mr. Amadin, your question is actually a very sober one. Very, very, very sober. And even with the fact you made a reference on the younger ones, you know. I remember, before I come to answer your question, I remember it took me to maybe up to when I was, say, 30, if I'm not mistaken, for me to ever check into a hotel for the first time at the age of 30, you know. And I'm watching right now, you go to hotels now to work or you travel, you see 18 years old, 20 years old. And not just that they are checking in the hotel. If you come down, you look at the kind of car that they are. I mean, you wonder, you know that definitely this is a problem. So now back to answer you. The elders are still interested in vote buying brazenly, like we saw in all the primaries that has happened in this country. The younger ones, the up generation that's supposed in the next 20, 30 years supposed to lead the reins of leadership, we're already finding them deeply soiled in internet fraud, and rightfully because of one thing. On both divides, is back to the institutions again we are talking about. There are no institutions that serve as deterrent agency, because the rule of law, when it's upheld in a nation, makes everyone to know and understand the consequences. So you see, we're coming back to institutions again. See, Nigerians think that to solve Nigerian problem is a magic wand approach. It can never be. In any society, it's really not a magic wand approach. It is the whole institutions working, but there is one that is central, which is the police. When I mean police, which is the eyes and the regulator, which is the judiciary and the law enforcement agencies. It could be the police, it could be the customs, it could be the military, it could be anything. Their job is to what? To enforce that judgment that comes as a result of going out of order. So if you look at this country, look at this last election. I don't know whether you've seen cases of people who maybe vote buying thugs around the 36 states that have been prosecuted so far. You will not hear anything like that. What about people who have been kidnapped? People are kidnapped, they are rescued and everything, and yet you are not hearing, even on the TV, you are not hearing cases of how they are being tried. Now, in a society, that's why you see it in the West, especially like US, you see that for every trial, for every law stuff, they make everybody to see it, because you yourself will now be guided, knowing that if I do this, this is the direct consequence of it. There's a lot of consciousness for staying in the ambit of the law. It's not as if most of those people there are not more rougher than how we are here in Nigeria. In fact, in retrospect, I think that sometimes Africans will do very well. It's just that we don't have that same enabling environment. So it's bowing down to one thing. Look at what has just happened in the last election. Look at what happened in the was it the APPC primary and PDP primaries that happened, and a particular person, it went around viral on social media. The money he collected, he used it to buy jerseys. You saw it. Now, do you even know the meaning of that video that went viral? That he's using even the proceeds of something that is illegal to be sponsoring people, meaning that he actually collected it in other developed climes. You dare not even try to even show the benevolence you're trying to do for people, much more the fact that you even collected it. It must not only be a secret, but it should be a secret that should not even come out beyond wherever you were given or you were induced. So we have a failure of the institution, especially of the judiciary or the law enforcement. So you see, it comes back to institutions, okay? And some people rightfully say that, okay, it's because there's a breakdown of values. Of course, values will always break down when there's nobody enforcing the values, or there's nobody trying to install the values. Look at what is happening with these younger ones we are talking about. What values do those systems have? Somebody went to the prison in the southeast, and she came out and she was telling me that we need to do something fast for some of the young ones in the southeast, that the number of prisoners or people who are locked in for internet-related activities are at an alarming rate. And you say, you know what that means for them? That even if they are freed, after a while, they are still going to be labeled as convicts. So if they get reformed in the future, by the time it comes to elective positions, you see them not getting it. And then in another section of the country, you're not even hearing people going into jail, whether it's for drug-related, because that side of the country abuse drug a lot. And you will not see them going in for internet-related crimes. So at a point in time in Nigeria, you're going to have a lot of people coming out from the south who have been tainted with this kind of ex-convict label on them, and they cannot hold elective positions. So breakdown of values, breakdown of governmental institutions that enforces justice.
Right, that's fair enough. You made a very interesting point there, which is the the cultural aspect or the societal aspect of shaming people who have stepped out of the norms, and we're not seeing a lot of that because, I mean, if a lot of this was made public, it would be very, to put that societal blame, because it works a lot for Nigerians. What will people say? People will say this, people will say that. So if someone is caught vote buying or selling, and they are, sort of ostracized and say, that man is a vote buyer, convicted, obviously, not just allegations, I think it helps with the system. Well, I'd like to get your thoughts on an argument. It's a growing argument. It's not popular yet, but it's happening on the issue of solutions now. There are people, both with, I suppose, with the right mindset of trying to save the country, who believe that the key is participation in politics, but they differ on the kind of participation. Now, we have some persons saying, we just need to get our PVCs, we need to go out, we need to vote, and then you get the government you want, you get the right thing. And others say, that's not enough. If you want true change, you have to join political parties. You can't speak from outside, even if there's a majority of you supporting a candidate within a party. If you're not in that party, you have no real power. So what do you make of that argument? Do you think at the end of the day, people might need to bite the bullet and just join this thing that a lot of people have tainted with a bad light, that if you're in politics, you're a wicked person or you're a bad person or corrupt? Is that really the solution, or simply can you just make that commitment that I will always vote, I will always pay attention to the candidates, but I'm not joining a party?
So I think it works on two ways, because we're a product of our society. And when you see a political party that has not defined what their ideology and their focus will be, which is what we have seen so far. Labour Party in the last 3 weeks, you see what is in the last 1 month, okay, it's almost becoming like a case of hopelessness. They are still trying to hold it tight to be one. If not, we're not going to have an opposition in the next administration. Okay, so number one, we tell people, even me, I'm warming up again, to go back into politics again, but I'm going to take my seat there because I know what I'm coming to. I'm not going to be taking in, or people who know what they're doing. From some of the persons I've related to, they're not just sucked into the whole system of politicking for gain. They are putting Nigeria first, which is what a lot of our parties don't have. Okay, permit me to digress a little bit. The ANC of South Africa, when they started years ago, okay, one of the things that they were known for was that they only have one interest, and that was the liberation of South Africa. Okay, by the time they got that liberation, they were still not focused on the development, because what their people needed was more or less about development. So it is two things. Number one, people go into politics who are value-based and who are visionary. I use those two words intentionally. You must be value-based because your character will always be tested. Number two, you must be visionary. What is your vision for development? If you come in as a liberal party that wants to give, like, for example, free education, free health, certain kind of benefits for the people, free enterprise, opening up the economy, okay, for investment and everything, okay, you must be that kind of thinker in those kind of political parties. So yes, I think good heads should enter. On the other aspect is not just saying I want to go and cast my vote. That is the lowest level of engagement as a citizens. Why can't citizens come together and form what I call intelligentsias? Okay, get 5 of you, 10 of you. You're in the media. I'm sure you have some of the best of your friends are in the media. This thing, get 10 of yourself, form a small coalition of something with a name. We're going to be talking on a particular aspect of consciousness. It's just a consciousness. It is perfectly under the law. It's not NBC offensive, it's not in your workplace offensive, but you are bringing a kind of narrative. You can imagine if you have this kind of narrative or this kind of intelligence, because intelligentsias are basically enlightened people who come together to just either form or shape culture or reform something within a society, which is what you see a lot in Europe. That's why you see them having little groups. For each of these little groups, the insights they bring are powerful. Then we are more fortunate in our generation. And why are we fortunate? Because of the social media. Social media makes you to come out and you are ahead more than before. You have to wait to be on the television like what we are trying to do now. The conversations on Twitter sometimes are much more viral in a day than even how people watch a particular TV, even on the most popular TV stations. Okay, so you can imagine if we have this kind of intelligentsias from secondary school students, broadcasters like you, lawyers, accountants, different kind of people all over the country, market people, just a group of people, they just come, but there is a focus Now, anytime the people start to unite themselves in their small way like this, but with a central interest, either the interest of what is bringing them together within their space or the interest of the nation, I can tell you the game starts to change. It is the lack of these conversations that makes politicians to be brazen in some of the narratives they will do, because power will always reside by the people. By the people. I remember Dogowa, the man from Kano. If you followed in the narrative before the election, made some kind of boast, and he tried to carry out certain things during the election, and you saw what happened to him. That's to tell you that the power does not reside with the politician, no matter how he thinks. But the level of consciousness, awareness, okay, which we call woke in our own society, is extremely low. So we are of the opinion people should engage. We are also of the opinion that people should form little intelligentsia to put pressure on the system. So some people call it CSO. Yes, it's a form of CSO, but everybody is civil. Everybody is part of the society, and they need to get organized.
That's fair enough. You brought a third part to the argument, and I think it's interesting. We can always combine, take the best of all of them.
Okay.
All right. Now, speaking about the future, how do you think we can move on from this? Because prior to this, there was really a lot of hope. I've had a lot of guests here who've spoken about the election, and they said, I was so excited. I had so much faith, so much belief. Some persons even talk about convincing others to go and vote, using their own reputation to say, don't worry, INEC is going to do this. And they say, they feel a little bit betrayed that they put themselves on the line for the body, and this happened. But that aside, what is the way forward in terms of electoral reforms? Because people believe that if reforms come, or they did anyway, I hope it's still ongoing, if the reforms are there, the system is better. So how do you think we can move on from this so that there's not a complete lack of apathy that, it will never work? How do we get back to that place where, or let me put it this way, what kind of reforms can we expect now, or what are the lessons learned? I'll give an example of this. We have now that there are several press releases, press briefings, speaking where the INEC chairman and the INEC commissioner for information and voter education repeatedly said that they would transmit results electronically. Now, afterwards, the election, we heard from the Senate president saying it was misconstrued. Others are saying that's not really how it is. This is how it is. And there's a lot of technicalities coming in to make people feel like what they heard, they did not hear it. So, how do we go forward from this? How can we make it that whatever is said or written, when it happens, we can hold them that, no, you're not going back. This is how it is. You're not going anywhere. You must do it the way you said you would do it.
So two things, leadership and citizens' participation. I hope and I wish that going forward in Nigeria, we can have leaders, and by the way, that's the kind of courage somebody like Mimiko shows as a leader, or like a Dr. Sam Amadin shows, or Professor Jega shows, where when you're giving the right to head an organization, your word is your bond. For example, let me ask, if Mike Igini was the INEC commissioner, I hope you know that what would have happened in the election would have been unforgivable, because it is now Mike Igini that is known. Even among, there are several INEC commissioners. Why is it the only one that is standing out? Right? So that's why, first of all, we put it squarely on leadership. Everything rises and falls at the place of leadership. We'll keep on saying it. Every leader that stood up in the midst of whatever has happened in society, the hype of this election that does happen was because a man came up to show leadership. He could show his track record. So we are demanding leadership across board, because for everywhere you demand leadership and people live up to it, such a person goes up, and whatever he says is going to be kept very well, and it's going to be trusted, because what has happened in this election is something we need to be very sensitive about. It is trust that was broken. I told people, just like what you said, you have to go out to vote. I mobilized people, you have to do this. I encouraged, I came on media at several platforms saying, no, INEC will keep to their word. We thought they would keep to their word. Because in the essence of the presidential election is not that you should be able to transmit based on the House of Representatives, but that the main thing that everybody came out to congregate themselves for the highest level of leadership called the presidency, that was what failed. And money was put on it. Okay, now that takes us to the second part, the citizen participation. I know some lawyers, young lawyers, who suddenly recently have been taking governments to court and the rest. And do you know what? They must appear. They must appear.
You mean the government? Or?
Yeah, I mean anybody that takes INEC or some of these people to court, you must appear to go and answer.
Yes.
Whether you have the most sophisticated lawyers. Can you imagine all around Nigeria now, the citizens, for all the promises, come and give us how our money was spent for this election? Because the goal of this election was dash, and we cannot sweep that kind of money under feet. If it is in America or in some countries in Europe, you cannot give an excuse, because that money was spent, and that money was public money, and we are spending that money from an economy that is not working, that is recessed and everything. And by the essence of even demanding for that, certain people are going to go to jail. So when I mean citizens' participation, that's what brought out the rise of budget, by the way, and SERAP and some of these organizations. Do you know what? We need like 1,000 of those. Every day they go to court. Every day they put the system. That is the beginning. Because citizens have the right for these things. But you know what? Citizens don't even believe it. Citizens feel like until your lawyer is a son, or you have to, before you can go to the court to demand. You have the right to ask and say Freedom of Information Bill. I know one of the parties that made this election, census to be postponed. A young lawyer, you know, that went to the court and challenged it. And look at what we're having. Because you cannot tell us we are going to census and nobody is testing your technology, nobody is talking about it. So many things are inconsistent, and we're just going to walk into a census like that, you know. So citizens' participation, where every citizen will begin to make a demand. Unfortunately, and I think that's why we need to, and I think we have to keep on mainstreaming that kind of conversation on your platform. Take a survey of how democracies work or how nations are built in developed economies. You discover that there are blocks like this, there are intelligentsias like this, there are civil society organizations like this all over the country, even proprietors of state schools or private schools. Everybody is fighting for their interests. But if you look at what is happening in Nigeria now, you will not even see that kind of demand. It's looking like election has come and has gone. You can't have that kind of pressure group. That's why it's called pressure groups around a government, and the government will not do well. Because at the end of the day, the government knows that we are in governance for the sake of all these interests, for a main interest. So, for example, you want to register a company in CAC, and you're having a long time, and you're talking about ease of business. When everywhere in the world, some people ease of business of people registering a company, turnaround time is 30 minutes. 30 minutes to register a company, as far as all your documents are ready, and you can tender it. They just process it, you get it, and you just enter business in a same day. When it comes to Nigeria, you spend months. So I think leadership, we need to keep on demanding more from the leadership, holding them accountable by a lot of civil participation from the citizens.
That's fair enough. You know, it reminds me of I think one of perhaps most important cases that happened around between the time of the presidential and the governorship elections, if I remember correctly. Actually, a member of your Abuja school, yes, okay. Victor Patola.
Oh yes.
He won a case where
temporary voters
card, and I think it's a very major.
That's a landslide victory.
And you know, when we broke down that conversation, it actually appeared that truly there is even no need for the PVC.
Of course.
And inadvertently, Nigeria has actually got to a place where they've advanced, but it seems like the country doesn't know.
That is what we're saying. They are not aware, they are not conscious. So some people that didn't even get their PVC, as long as they had their temporary voters card, they would. But you see, we also need a lot to even push out that narrative that this was in court, this was what was granted, and therefore with your temporary card you can go out. Do you know how many people have gone out just at knowing that such exists?
Yes.
So you can say, like what you have said, we've so advanced, but we still do not even know how advanced.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now moving forward, it has happened now, and there's a phrase that has become very popular during this period: go to court. You know, whenever anything happens, go to court. And you know, really the hope before the election was that the Electoral Act would, you know, mop up these things so that people wouldn't need to go to court, or if people went to court, the outcome can already be predicted, because the Electoral Act is very clear on a lot of issues, which a lot of people are not aware of. But that being said, we are now at that phase, the courts phase. A lot of the cases now, and I believe the presidential, you know, tribunal is beginning in May, about May 10, if I'm correct. So, what are now the expectations at this stage of the cycle? Because it's like the courts have have inadvertently become a part of the electoral cycle, where they are the final arbiters, the ones who will decide at the end of the day. At this point in time, what are the expectations, and how do you think things can be done in a better manner? Because I believe there seem to be more eyes on the judiciary than usual.
Yeah. So it's a very I want to talk realistically now. I don't want to talk hypothetically. I don't want to talk professionally, or I want to talk realistically now, because at the end of the day, what we saw in the election, what is a surprise for most Nigerians, for some people were not a surprise. Some people were like, but didn't you see it? It was going to be. I'm like, so how did you see it? He said, no, we have to be like this because of this and this and this and this. And you just look like a fool, like you follow the bandwagon of believing that INEC will do whatever they say to. So I want to come from that kind of perspective now, the street perspective and the, what I call a realistic perspective. We've seen what happened to Governor Adeleke. So I want to use a context. When how the first time he came, the court upturned him, and they were about upturning him right now, and he's still sitting, right? And if you hear the controversies of the case and everything, both with him, of his document those days, and also the involvement of the judiciary and the rest, you will know that it was dicey, and that what made him to win overwhelmingly, no matter what the court was trying to upturn recently, was the fact that everybody came out en masse to vote him. So that already, that's why I say respect the will of the people. The people in a society, in democracy, actually mean a lot. All right? Now, coming back to now Nigeria as a whole, before we are now going to talk about the election cases that will start springing from the state level, let's look at it also from the context of the presidency. Okay? If you've noticed on your polls and everything, there was high expectation immediately after the election that the opposition party, who allegedly said they won the election, if they go to court, they will give it. But do you know what? If we test that pulse for the last 3 weeks till on the 10th, you discover that pulse has been going down. And if you know anything about Nigerians, Nigeria are fast to develop apathy. Why? And it is rightfully so. They do not believe in the system. Nigerians underestimate what it means for citizens not to believe in a system. That is the first sign of a collapsed state. That's why American will tell you something, that I know that no matter what happens, this healthcare insurance will take care of me, this security cover will take care of me, this will take care of me, just because he is a citizen. So even in Nigeria, we've not evolved the concept of what it means to be a citizen. So to be a citizen doesn't just mean that I was just born in Nigeria. So those rights and privileges that even when people go to court, the justice system will hear them. It's part of the privileges of being a citizen. That's why the judiciary will now uphold their judgments very high, because it's not about the judgment, it's about the trust of the people within the society. Right now, you hear how people make analysis that no matter how this case grows, this is where it's going to end. It's going to end at the Supreme Court. And at the Supreme Court, this is there, that is there, that is there, that is there. The Chief Justice is like this, therefore it will be like this. Already giving you, already making you to know that this is not what is supposed to be done. If the judiciary, for me, I not just want to now speak directly to them, realistically again, if the judiciary wants to buy back her name again, this is the highest test for the judiciary now. I don't want to say some things allegedly on air of what you hear lawyers say about justices. It's something that is you don't want to hear. But I will not speak to such holy sanctity in the air like this without having my own facts too, because these things are still allegations. So I will not play that card. You will discover that this is the golden moment to answer your question realistically for the judiciary to just once again buy their name. And how will they do it? When you bring, sometimes when they bring these election cases, there are many trivial issues before even the main issue. Sometimes the whole claims or the prayers are actually trivial, but they'll pad it to make it look as if though it has this thing. Like I tell some people, I say, if you think Labour Party should be anchoring their judgment on that and federal capital, I say you better go and look for better things to say, because in one judgment, in one soup, that in the appeal court is going to, and rightfully so, you better get something that is very, very substantive. You have documents, you have evidence, is to prove and drag it, because this is not the first time we've gone to presidential. From the time of Buhari up to when he became a president, there has been no appeal that has ever stood. It will just fall down. So right now, I just feel that the judiciary should come out, stand their name, so that whatever judgment they are given, whether it's from the state level or on the presidential level, it will be so objective, because objectivity is what INEC lacked during the election, because they were not transparent. If it is transparent, everybody will believe INEC. Okay? All right. Now, if it is fair too, everybody will say, you guys, you did a good job, no matter any hitches that would have happened. So it's now back to the judiciary. Judiciary, can you now keep your own part of the bargain as an institution? Strike out frivolous cases, let your judgment be known for it. If the persons take it for an appeal at the next level, based on what the lower court did, strike it out. At the point, the politicians will begin to know that the real place you need to start winning now is back to the electorate, because this is the only country in the world that has this number of cases that goes to court. It's not done. When you believe in your institution will deliver for you, and you don't need to go to court. So I think what needs to be done now, and that's why you see in the society where justice fails, I can tell you anarchy is just at the door. That if the judicial systems will for once, that's why there's a lot of pressure on some of them. People are talking to them, they are having meetings, okay? And they're also preparing, because the timeline they have to deliver judgment, because on their hands, they also know lies peace or war of a nation. And Nigeria is already deeply fermented in the embers of war. So if they can give fair judgment and transparent and dish out whatever is supposed to dish, even their lawyers will abide by it. Remember, there's a peace accord that's still trying to bind some of them. So you see some of these players are still trying to be calm, but it's just the people who, some of them are apathetic, some of them are not going to be apathetic, they are going to really fight the system. And I also want to appeal also for the incoming administration. You know, like President Yaradua. President Yaradua was a very honest man. He acknowledged the process that brought him in. And look at what he did, just like what I was saying. He went straight to strengthen the rule of law. Because that was what he was known for eventually. Among the 7-point agenda, everybody started to call him as a man of rule of law. And it was working. The same thing for this administration. We don't care what process have brought you in, but strengthen the rule of law. Let it make it look like the justice system works. Pre-elections cases like we're having now, and by the time they come in, let the judiciary do what they're supposed to do. And all the institutions, everybody will begin to have confidence in the system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tochukwu. It's always a pleasure having you. It was so good to hear your thoughts and your analysis today. Thanks for coming.
Very much. I'm grateful. Thank you.
All right, that's all we take on this segment of the program. We'll go on a break and bring you some more reports when we return. The Polity continues. Stay with us. We'll be right back.